Talk to almost any international business and you'll discover a sincere and dutiful commitment to the pursuit of net zero. Most corporates, like most people, understand the physical impacts of climate change. The medium-term climate imperatives are well and widely understood. But what about the here and now? How are corporates really coping? In this new research, Eversheds Sutherland and KPMG wanted to probe beneath the rhetoric and discover the practical problems that boards are tackling. They wanted to find out how the biggest institutional investors are truly changing their approach and define the scope for real and meaningful changes to the whole culture of climate risk and disclosure. Michelle Davies of Eversheds Sutherland and Michael Hayes of KPMG led an exploration with boardroom leaders from over 500 of the world's leading companies. What follows is an extract of their interviews, real conversations that highlight how CEOs are dealing with a stark transition. A transition permeating all sectors, a transition demanding immediate attention.
In addition to undertaking the survey, we wanted to interview companies sitting within different sectors, and we also wanted to interview the people who are providing the capital and who are in the firing line for the new regulation, as well as those people who are really at the forefront of influencing and shaping policy. One of those interviews was with Jim Barry of BlackRock. So Jim, there has been a lot of talk, I mean, we see it a lot in the press around how boards of companies are responding to climate risk. One of the concerns that Mike and I had was whether climate risk was really understood and what action was really being undertaken to deal with it. It would be great to hear what your experiences of this.
Well, Michelle, I think that's a really key question. And I think the reality is you have a range of what I would call the internalization of what lies ahead, depending on the company you're dealing with. I would say that any company that's directly involved in the energy and power sector has finally got it. Even those fully exposed to carbon, like the oil majors, now appreciate the world has changed. And you can see it in their real strategic dilemma as to whether they try and evolve for the new world or effectively ride carbon out. And that's a key strategic choice they'll have to make. I think when you move to the world more generally, I think any business and board that has more consumer facing business, I think is much more likely to sort of understand that things are changing because their customers are beginning to demand it and they're attuned to listening to the customer. But I would say more generally, I would say boards have an intellectual engagement on the point. I think they understand it has changed. They're reading the same newspaper articles, they're hearing the same political pronouncements as the rest of us, but I'm not sure generally it's fully internalized. And I think that's a journey a lot of boards are going to go on over the next few years. And I think for a lot of them, it's going to be a real challenge because it's going to require such a dramatic change in thinking as they face up to the full implications of decarbonizing our global economy.
Jim, one of the things that really worries me about the climate change agenda is the impact it is having on asset valuations. There are assets sitting in investment portfolios across the world, including in BlackRock's own portfolios, that I know, and I think you know, are overvalued because climate risk has not been taken into account. What does this mean for an organization like BlackRock as it looks across its own investment portfolio? Is this a concern for you? And what sort of actions do you plan to take to alleviate this?
Mike, I think the issue of stranded assets is critical. And for investors like myself, where we have as much carbon exposure as we have renewable exposure, it becomes the critical issue. Because I can look at an asset today that kind of is carbon exposed like a pipeline, say an oil pipeline, and maybe I can get comfortable on the back of contracts it has as I look out over the next 15, 20 years. But the real question is, in 7 to 10 years time, when I come to sell that asset, will I have any confidence in the 15 to 20 year cash flows from there? And I think that goes to the heart of the risk you're now taking with respect to investing in what I would call the conventional carbon-based energy and power sector.
Hello, Jaco. Thank you so much for joining us today. Wärtsilä is very much engaged in the climate change agenda, both on its own behalf, but also with its customers. What do you think needs to be done to enable corporates to prioritise dealing with climate risk? And what do you think makes a company act quickly or delay acting at the moment?
What prevents some from acting or acting quickly enough is really that, I mean, there are a lot of issues, barriers. One is, clear signals. What are the concrete measures and which should be done? I mean, you don't have clear signals what is important and what is not. Regulation, definitely lack of consistency. Sometimes the regulation is too slow. Sometimes it's extremely fast, and the ambition levels are extremely high. I had a meeting with our Finnish Prime Minister where we visited one of the first players in the Power-to-X technologies here in Finland, basically creating or capturing CO2 and creating from air a fuel which can be then used as an energy source. So this is a carbon neutral process. It's a way how to improve the air inside your house or your office or school. So if you decrease the CO2 in your air, you work better, and then you create actually free fuel from air, and this is an example created from the people reporting to me together with outside startups, players, universities. So again, cooperation, our people having the interest on looking at decarbonization, and one example again of how important and how great it is to develop these new fuels and the new world.
Corporates are embracing the reality of climate change. They now understand that this is not just a nebulous issue. This is something that impacts every single business. You don't have to be in the fossil fuel sector. No matter what sector you're in, climate change matters. And what I got from this report is corporates have made this a boardroom issue. CEOs and other senior executive officers and non-executive directors are taking this incredibly seriously. The other message that came through really was that while they're taking it seriously, the solutions are not always obvious, and there's a lot of work to be done at a corporate level to actually achieve the type of carbon business that they're hoping to achieve over the next 10 years.
Jim and Jaco, thank you so much for giving us your time today to be interviewed. And I think it's pretty clear that without companies understanding climate risk and in a way that enables them to develop a detailed strategy for making the changes that are required, everything that's happening now isn't going to have the desired impact. This is hugely important, and I'm genuinely grateful. Mike and I are grateful to you for participating in this. Thank you.
The one message I want to give is that there is no vaccine for climate change. Clearly, in recent months, there has been a lot of discussion about COVID-19 and the wider climate change agenda. Let me say one thing. COVID-19, although incredibly serious, is unfortunately nothing more than a dress rehearsal for climate change.
The Climate Change and Corporate Value Report. The journey has begun. Let's take it together.